If you are looking for the most in-depth Jade guide for 9 Souls, you've come to the right place. In this video, we'll be going over every Jade in 9 Souls, including how to get them, what they do, synergies, secret features, as well as the numbers the game doesn't tell you. Sit back, get comfortable, and let's get on with this journey. Oh, and do me a favor by liking and commenting to help out with the algorithm. First up, we have the Stasis Jade. The Stasis Jade is obtained pretty early on by defeating the Red Tiger Elite Beishang Meeting boss located in the 8-man facility. This Jade costs 2 CP to equip and gives talisman attacks a small stun effect when passing through enemies. This is particularly useful early on as it gives some much needed breathing room as you get used to the game's punishing combat system. By default, the talisman attack already has a mini 0.2 second stun built into it, but the Stasis Jade increases this duration depending on what enemy you're hitting. As a general rule, the stronger the foe, the shorter the duration. Normal enemies as well as elites are stunned for a full 1 second. Mini-bosses are half that amount at only 0.5 seconds. And finally, bosses are only stunned for 0.25 seconds, barely an increase from the base 0.2 seconds we would have even without this Jade. It's also worth noting that this stun doesn't actually interrupt or cancel the boss's moves, and if the boss was about to ruin your day right before you stunned it, you better hope you aren't in the same place after those 0.2 seconds are up, because it's going to continue on from whatever part of the animation it was up to before you applied the stun. So while this is a great Jade for exploring, and can definitely let you get in a few extra hits in some situations, I like to think of it kind of like a set of training wheels for the talisman attack. It's good for learning at the start, but at some point you're better off taking them off and just learning the right time to use it without taking damage. As for the synergies, this Jade goes well with anything talisman related really. Throw on the mob Quell Jades and you can be stunning up to 3 enemies at once, or try it with the Steely Jade for even more safety while detonating your talisman, although this particular combination is probably a bit overkill, and I wouldn't really recommend it. Next up we have the Mob Quell Jade, which comes in the Yin and the Yang variety. The Mob Quell Yin Jade can be found in the prison by completing a hacking puzzle to gain access to a chest. The Yang version, on the other hand, can be crafted for 750 Jin from the pavilion. These Jades both cost 2 CP to equip and allow your talisman attack to hit 1 additional target, meaning if you equip both at the same time, you can tag 3 targets with a single attack. This does have a niche use in situations where you're fighting multiple enemies at once, and has the added benefit of letting you trigger your transmute into ki, wealth, or health ability multiple times for 1 cast. And I did like to use one of these Jades on a few bosses that had multiple opponents. However, outside of that, there aren't many situations that really justify the combined 4 CP cost of using both at once. As we just mentioned before, it does technically synergize well with the Stasis Jade for stuns, as well as the Steely Jade to ensure you get your detonation off. However, it's not exactly a particularly potent synergy. And lucky last of the green Jades is the Steely Jade. Steely Jade can be found in the power reservoir inside a hackable chest. This Jade costs 2 CP to equip and prevents your talisman detonation from being interrupted when taking damage. This one is pretty straightforward at first glance, but in my opinion is one of the better Jades in the game, and let me tell you why that is. Having this Jade equipped means you won't get interrupted while detonating, meaning you're all but guaranteed to get all your damage off as long as you land the initial talisman attack. But what it doesn't tell you is all the damage you take during the channeling of the detonation is all converted to internal damage. That's when your health bar turns red instead of disappearing. Now, to get across how amazing this is, I have to explain a few key features of internal damage. For starters, so long as you don't get hit again, you'll slowly convert this internal damage back into real health. And the second and more important thing is, internal damage can never actually kill you. Even if your entire health bar is internal damage and you get hit again, as long as it's internal damage, you still won't die. Now combine this with a 5 key explosion from a full control and you have yourself an on-demand 1.3 second window of semi-invincibility. You do have to play a bit safe if you took a beating during this window to let your internal damage regenerate, but even if you did, there are Jades that can help with this, or better yet, even turn it into an advantage. And that leads us into the various synergies this Jade has. Now, if we're looking to offload this internal damage, obviously the Breather Jade is going to be a big help. As long as you can hit something, you'll recover your internal damage in no time at all. Alternatively, for a more passive approach, the Recovery Jade is going to boost your natural regen by a huge amount, and before you know it, your health bar will be back to where it was without even having to take a puff of the pipe. And finally, one of my favourite combinations, pair it up with the Reciprocation Jade to transfer a portion of all that internal damage to an enemy when landing an unbound counter. This is definitely a lot riskier of a strategy, but if you can pull it off, No other Jade combo can heal such a huge amount of health while simultaneously dealing crazy amounts of damage. Pauper Jade. The Pauper Jade is found in the East Power Reservoir and is dropped by killing a walking treasure chest. This Jade costs 1 CP to equip and will increase your Jin collection radius. We can visualize the exact increase by turning on the game's hitboxes and comparing the circles around Yi. This circle here represents the base pickup range, while this one shows the radius with the Pauper Jade equipped. And by measuring the pixels, we can see the Jade quadruples the range. This Jade is obviously flat out useless for combat, but it is nice if you have a spare slot and nothing better to throw on. As for synergies, well, it can conceivably be used with the Avarice Jade, which increases the amount of Jin dropped for an even easier way of farming money. Soul Reaper Jade. The Soul Reaper Jade can be found in the Yaoshi ruins, in one of the buildings. Simply enter and complete the hacking puzzle to gain access to a chest containing the Jade. This Jade costs 1 CP and lets you recover lost experience in Jin by detonating a talisman explosion on the enemy that killed you instead of having to outright kill them. Now, if we're going by the name alone, this Jade would be the coolest in the game. I mean, Soul Reaper sounds like it's gonna do something amazing. In reality, however, its effects are sadly pretty lackluster, and it's one of the only Jades in the game I never actually equipped. Sure, if you lose a huge amount of experience in Jin and you just want to guarantee you get it back, this could come in handy, I guess. But you know what else you could do? Just kill the enemy and recover it the normal way. Despite this, it can help slightly in combat as it is able to trigger the life recovery skill, giving Yi a heal when recovering lost experience in Jin. Other than that though, it doesn't really have any particular synergies with any other Jades, so we'll move on. Avarice Jade. The Avarice Jade is dropped by a mini-boss in the greenhouse. Simply ring the bell to summon the boss, and once they are defeated, you'll receive the Jade. This Jade costs 2 CP to equip and increases the amount of Jin dropped by enemies. 33% rounded up is the exact amount extra you'll be receiving, and strictly only applied to the Jin dropped from dead enemies. Chests, selling items, and even the Transmute unto Wealth ability are all unaffected, sadly. This Jade is extremely useful for farming Jin. Now, sure, some will argue farming is unnecessary, as you tend to get more than enough Jin by the end of the game anyway, but I disagree. This will allow you to get more upgrades and items far earlier than you normally would, which could be the difference between beating a boss in a few tries versus being stuck on it for hours. It goes well with the Pauper Jade for easier Jin collection, and also the Transmute unto Wealth for again, even more Jin. And the last of the Gold Jades, we have the Cultivation Jade. The Cultivation Jade is found in the Yinglong Canal in a hackable chest. This Jade costs 2 CP to equip and increases the amount of experience received from enemies. This Jade will be increasing our experience earned from combat by 33%, meaning you'll be unlocking skills a lot faster. Similar to the Avarice Jade accelerating the speed we can purchase upgrades, so too does the Cultivation Jade have an indirect impact on combat by giving us access to skills and passives we may not have otherwise had. Immovable Jade. The Immovable Jade can be found in the Lake Yaoshi ruins in a locked chest. This Jade costs 2 CP and reduces the charge up time for the Charge Strike when standing still. The Charge Strike deals 320% of your base attack and normally takes 0.95 seconds to charge. With the Immovable Jade equipped, this number is just about halved and goes down to 0.5 seconds, a 47% decrease. Similar to the nail arts of Hollow Knight, even with this Jade equipped, you'll still want to be charging at times you couldn't otherwise be attacking an opponent for the most DPS. Unfortunately, you do have to remain completely still to get the effect of this Jade. Despite that, it can still be useful in a variety of scenarios and builds, especially if you haven't unlocked the stun effect of the Cloud Piercer arrow and are fighting enemies that require a charged attack to break through a shield or other effect. It has natural synergy with the Focus Jade, which further increases Charge Strike's damage and range in exchange for consuming some ki. Harness Force Jade. The Harness Force Jade is given by Shiyu in exchange for a portrait of Yi. To get this, you'll need to have gifted Xuan Xuan the 4 treasures of the study artifact located below the root node in the central transport hub. This Jade costs 1 CP to equip and will finish any ongoing charge attack if performing a perfect parry. Harness Force trades the predictability that the Immovable Jade had in exchange for costing 1 less CP, as well as being a bit harder to use. Able to complete the charge strike the instant you parry, provided you've started the charge prior to getting hit, this Jade essentially turns the charge strike into a pseudo counter ability. The moment you get hit and parry, you'll be able to strike back with the charge strike. although your mileage may vary depending on the enemy and its attack pattern, and it does fall short in situations where you need to execute a charge strike. At times there's nothing to parry. It does take a little bit of practice to use well, but when used right it can be a key player of a build. Since this Jade interacts with both parry and the charge attack, this Jade has a few more synergies than the Immovable Jade did. The Focus Jade is the most obvious synergy of all, and perfectly complements Harness Force. Not only is it going to boost the range and damage of the charge attack in exchange for one key, but since you'll be parrying to trigger Harness Force anyway, you'll always have one key to spend. Hedgehog is also a nice match. Hedgehog will deal some internal damage to an enemy each time you perfect parry, and again, since Harness Force encourages just that, it's a no-brainer. Bearing Jade, which reduces recoil after parrying, can also be useful in niche situations, guaranteeing you're still in range to unload your charge strike after being hit. And finally, Key Swipe also synergizes well by giving you an extra max key as well as 2 key every time you perfect parry instead of 1, meaning even more key to spend on charge strikes or talisman attacks. Up next we have the Swift Blade Jade. The Swift Blade Jade is located in the walking chest underneath the root node in the abandoned mines. This Jade costs 2 CP to equip and increases the speed of Yi's triple slash combo at the cost of inflicting some internal damage to yourself each hit. The triple slash combo takes around 1.35 seconds to execute, meaning on average you'll be doing 2.2 attacks per second. The time to complete this combo is cut by 38.5%, taking us to around 0.83 seconds and boosting our attacks per second to 3.6, around a 60% increase. For the aerial combo, it's a bit less effective, only giving around 25% increase in attack speed, but in both cases, it comes at the cost of inflicting 5 internal damage for each swing we do, and that is applied regardless if we hit something or not. To put 5 damage into perspective, we start the game with 120 health and max out at 240 with every upgrade. This Jade provides a huge boost to Yi's DPS, and allows you to get far more damage off in any openings a boss might give you. Just keep an eye out on your internal damage, or you could end up dead before the boss is. Swift Blade Jade has quite a few potent synergies that both counteract its negatives, as well as further enhance your damage dealing ability. The Breather Jade will perfectly negate the self-inflicted internal damage of Swift Blade. You will still take some internal damage if you swing and don't hit anything though, so keep that in mind. The Reciprocation Jade is another great option. As long as you're comfortable pulling off an unbound counter, you can simply transfer the internal damage you've built up to an enemy and make them deal with it. Key Blade Jade will give your third hit a huge power boost, and since we're getting to that third hit 60% faster, this is going to become far more reliable and boost our DPS even more. Just keep in mind that it's going to drain a lot of ki, so you probably won't be using the talisman much in this setup. And last of all, we have the Last Stand Jade. This will boost our damage at low health, and since we'll be naturally taking a lot of internal damage, there is a higher chance than usual we'll be triggering this for a nice boost to our DPS, although this is definitely a high risk strategy. Key Jade Blade. This can be found in the Grotto of Scriptures entry, in a hackable chest below the elevator. This Jade costs 3 CP to equip and empowers the third strike of the triple slash combo at the cost of some ki, increasing its damage and creating a shockwave, effectively extending its range. The triple slash combo consists of 2 light attacks and a slower heavy attack at the end. At maximum upgrades, the quicker strikes deal 40 damage each, with the final strike dealing 80. With the Key Blade Jade equipped, the final strike will now deal quintuple damage, boosting it all the way to a whopping 400. Not only that, but the shockwave it creates effectively gives you 238% more range. Now this is all amazing, but it does come with a huge drawback. To trigger this empowered strike, it will eat up 2 ki charges, meaning you're going to be eating through a lot of ki and probably aren't going to have much left for your talisman attacks. And it's for this reason it's not really recommended to use talisman focused jades while also having this jade equipped. So what jades does it synergize with? As we've previously mentioned, Swift Blade will further skyrocket your DPS and let you get to the empowered third strike much faster than normal. The Key Swipe Jade will help us by feeding much needed ki to sustain our empowered hits by giving us an extra maximum ki as well as an extra ki for perfect parries. Although we will take some internal damage even when perfect parrying with this jade on. And last of all, Breathe the Jade. You'll be hitting enemies anyway, so why not restore some internal damage each hit? And, as a bit of a bonus, each individual enemy that your projectile hits will restore an extra 5 internal damage. Especially useful if you're using some of the above jades that inflict internal damage as a side effect. Health Thief Jade. This jade can be purchased from Shiyu for 600 Jin. The Health Thief Jade costs 2 CP and restores health when executing a successful Shadow Strike attack. Shadow strikes are triggered by hitting an enemy in the back with a strong attack, such as the third strike of a combo, a charge strike, an arrow, or a talisman detonation. Doing this correctly will cause the attack to deal 3 times more damage, and if you have the Health Thief Jade equipped, you'll also get a heal of 15 health. This can trigger multiple times if hitting more than one target at the same time. While this Jade is decent early on for some extra heals while exploring, it falls short later in the game, as the 15 health heal doesn't scale with max health or pipe upgrades, and eventually gets outclassed. It's also useless for boss fights as you can't trigger Shadow Strike mid-combat, which really cripples the effectiveness of the Jade. And last of the red Jades, we have the Focus Jade. This Jade is dropped by the mini-boss Celestial Sentinel Wu Quang in the factory production area. The Focus Jade costs 3 CP to equip and increases the range and power of the charge strike at the cost of a key charge. The basic charge strike deals 320% of a normal slash, or 128 damage with all upgrades. With the Focus Jade equipped, this goes up by 104 damage to 232, or 580% of a normal slash. And not only that, but the range of the attack is also increased by 38%. This gives you access to some really big burst damage, and while it still does cost 1 key charge to use, it's a lot easier to manage compared to the Key Blade, as it's only consuming 1 key charge instead of 2, and you always have the option of not using the charge strike if you want to save your key for a talisman attack. As for synergies, anything that helps us with the charge strike is a good match, and that leaves us with a choice of either Immovable for faster charging when standing still, or Harness Force to instantly charge a strike if perfect parrying. Hedgehog Jade. This Jade can be found in a chest in the pavilion, which is accessible after giving Xuan Xuan the Unknown Seed and GM Fertilizer. This Jade costs 3 CP to equip and will inflict internal damage to an opponent when successfully performing a perfect parry. The amount of internal damage inflicted is 10 per parry, or 15.4 with all upgrades, and this damage is only applied when parrying melee attacks. While 15 damage doesn't sound like a lot, in fights where enemies attack rapidly, this can quickly add up. In addition to this, all the extra internal damage you inflict through parrying will continually be resetting the regen timer and hinder an opponent's ability to recover their existing internal damage. Hedgehog goes well with anything that promotes perfect parrying. This includes the Harness Force Jade to complete any ongoing charge strike, as well as the key Swipe Jade, that will also net you an extra key charge when parrying. Reciprocation Jade. This Jade can be purchased from Shiyu for 4,000 Jin after escaping the prison. The Reciprocation Jade costs 2 CP to equip and transfers part of your internal damage to an enemy when unbound countering. The maximum internal damage this Jade can transfer is 85 at a time, making it one of the most potent healing Jades in the game, while at the same time dealing respectable damage as well, so long as you can pull off a talisman explosion to convert it into real damage. While it does require a bit more skill to use compared to similar Jades that heal internal damage, this is the only one that allows you to weaponize it against your enemy. This being the case means it has great synergy with Jades that self-inflict, or put you in situations where internal damage is likely, such as the Steely Jade, Swift Jade Blade, Key Swipe Jade, and Iron Skin Jade. The Divine Hand Jade can also be a useful combo, as being able to use unbound counters in rapid succession can quickly heal your internal damage to full in the right situation. Bearing Jade. This Jade can be found in a locked chest in the 8-man facility depths. The Bearing Jade costs 2 CP to equip and will reduce knockback when parrying. As for the exact amount it reduces, well, it's roughly by half. Although it is worth noting, this is only applied to when you actually parry successfully and not when you're taking damage. The Bearing Jade, sadly, is one of the more useless Jades in the game. It can be used in some niche situation if using Harness Force to attack after a parry, but even then it'll be hindering you just as often as it helps you. If it costs half as much to equip, it could be justified, but otherwise it's fairly useless. Divine Hand Jade. This Jade can be found in a chest in Grotto of Scriptures West. The Divine Jade costs 2 CP to equip and will allow you to perform back-to-back unbound counters. After initially performing a successful unbound counter, any parry performed in the next 0.65 seconds will instead become an instantly charged unbound counter. And this can be repeated as long as you keep unbound countering enemy attacks. Moving or failing to block an attack with a counter will cancel the chain. With all the skills unlocked, the unbound counter will deal 135 internal damage to an enemy if successful, meaning this Jade can actually stack up quite a bit of damage against foes with rapid attacks, while also building up quite a bit of ki. Overall, this is a really powerful Jade if used well, but it can take a bit of getting used to, and can land you in some trouble if used at awkward times. Divine Hand goes especially well with the Reciprocation Jade, having the potential to heal back and transfer huge amounts of internal damage to enemies. Ricochet Jade. This jade can be crafted at the 3D printer at the pavilion for 500 Jin. The Ricochet Jade costs 1 CP to equip and increases the damage of reflected projectiles, while also allowing imperfect parries to reflect projectiles as well. The Ricochet Jade will double the damage of deflected projectiles, and this number is the same regardless of whether an imperfect or perfect parry was used. This jade can be handy while exploring or when fighting specific mini-bosses with ranged attacks, and for only 1 CP can take the stress out of parrying ranged projectiles due to allowing you to imperfect parry them. However, most main bosses don't have any projectiles to reflect, limiting the usefulness of this jade. Unfortunately, ranged parries can't trigger things like the Hedgehog Jade, meaning there aren't particularly any good synergies to use this with, and it's more of a standalone jade. Key Swipe Jade. This jade is found in a chest in the Boundless repository after activating all 5 seals. The Key Swipe Jade costs 3 CP to equip and increases maximum key by 1, while also increasing key gain when using the precise parry, at the expense of taking some internal damage. Normally you'd get 1 key from a precise parry, but with the Key Swipe Jade this is doubled. You will, however, take 50% of the damage as internal damage instead of completely negating it, similar to an imprecise parry. Additionally, it will disable the breathing exercise skill, which causes precise parries to heal some internal damage. This jade is extremely useful for generating ki, making it perfect for builds that require large amounts of it. But even as a standalone jade, this will allow you to use talisman attacks far more often. Key Swipe has a strong synergy with quite a few different jades, including the Key Blade and Focus Jade, which it can supply the needed ki for, as well as the Reciprocation, Recovery and Breather Jade, which can all help deal with the internal damage it builds up. Swift Descent. This jade can be found in a chest in Factory Underground. Swift Descent costs 1 CP to equip and lowers the Immortal Dash cooldown while also giving the ability to dash downwards. Swift Descent lowers the basic dash cooldown by 25%, taking it from 1 second to 0.75 seconds. The vertical dash is not bound by the same cooldown as the base dash, and can be used immediately after or before a normal dash without affecting the cooldown. In fact, the vertical dash can be used again the instant you make contact with the ground. Swift Descent is one of the better low-cost jades in the game. Lower dash cooldown is almost always somewhat useful, and the improved aerial mobility that also allows you to quickly land back on the ground for unbound counters can really help lower the pressure of certain boss fights. Last Stand Jade. This jade can be purchased from Shiyu for 2000 Jin. The Last Stand Jade costs 2 CP to equip and increases damage dealt while at low health. The bonus damage from this jade triggers when below 25% health, and internal damage doesn't count towards this. Once below this threshold, ye will receive an extra 20% damage on slashes, charge strikes, azure bow attacks, talisman attacks, the Tai Chi kick, and the unbound counter. While the 20% extra damage is nice, being potentially a single hit away from death to trigger it is a hefty price to pay, limiting its usefulness for the average player. Since internal damage does not count towards the 25% threshold, jades that self-inflict internal damage can make it trigger more reliably. This includes mainly the Swift Blade Jade, which can result in some very high DPS potential, as well as the Key Swipe Jade. The Revival Jade is also useful, as it can make being at low health just that little bit safer and give you an extra try if you do get hit. Iron Skin Jade. This jade is given by Shiyu in exchange for the Legend of Porky Heroes. This is in turn given by Xuan after giving him the 4 treasures of the study artifact. Iron Skin costs 3 CP to equip and converts a portion of damage taken into internal damage. When taking damage with this jade equipped, 50% of it will instead be dealt as internal damage, giving you the potential to heal it back without having to use the pipe. This effect can be very useful, however the high CP cost can be a lot to ask. This jade only prevents damage done to real health and specifically from enemies. It does not interact with internal damage in any way, which means if you take more than a single hit at once, only the most recent hit will have its damage reduced, as the internal damage from previous hits will be converted to real damage with no reduction applied. Any self-inflicted damage such as from the Swift Blade or Key Swipe are also not affected, and things like fire and damage over time effects are also excluded. This jade is best paired up with other jades that can help with internal damage, and this includes the usual suspects of the Recovery Jade, Breather Jade and Reciprocation Jade, which all help offload that internal damage. Breather Jade. This jade can be found in a chest in the outer warehouse. Breather Jade costs 2 CP to equip and heals a portion of internal damage each time you hit an enemy. The exact amount of internal damage recovered is 5 per hit. Using the normal 3-hit combo, we can do about 2.2 attacks per second, meaning as long as we're hitting something, we can be healing around 11 health per second. If we jump cancel the last attack for a quicker combo, we can get this number to around 14 health per second. And of course, this doesn't interrupt the natural 4 regen per second, which kicks in after not taking damage for 5 seconds. This jade is usually in direct competition with the Recovery Jade, and assuming there's always something to be hitting, this jade would pull ahead on paper. But where this jade shines is with other jades that self-inflicts internal damage. Anytime you take internal damage, the regen delay counter is reset, which can hinder the effectiveness of the Recovery Jade. But since this jade doesn't use that mechanic to do its healing, it's not an issue, and it makes it the better choice for pairing it with jades such as the Swift Blade and the Key Swipe Jades. And it's not too bad with the Steely Jade and Iron Skin Jade as well, as it will help heal back any internal damage taken. Recovery Jade. This jade can be purchased for 1000 Jin from Shiyu. The Recovery Jade costs 2 CP to equip and speeds up the rate the internal damage is recovered. The Recovery Jade has 2 different effects, the first being to reduce the internal damage regen delay from 5 seconds without getting hit to 3 seconds, and the second is to triple that regen from 4 health per second to 12 health per second. To put that into perspective, that means we go from taking 60 seconds to regen our entire health bar to 20 seconds. This is a more defensive method of regaining internal damage compared to Breather, but as long as it's not constantly being interrupted, it's probably going to be providing more healing per second in most fights, outside of a player who can put a lot of pressure on the boss with constant hits. As mentioned, it does have some anti-synergy with the Swift Blade and Key Swipe Jade due to them deactivating and resetting the regen timer. But as long as you play with that in mind, it's still an effective way to heal it back. And it is of course great with Steely Jade and Iron Skin Jade as well, as you'll be taking a lot of internal damage. Medical Jade. This jade can be crafted at the 3D printer for 500 Jin at the pavilion. The Medical Jade costs 2 CP to equip and increases the health the pipe restores at the cost of it being over time instead of instant. With a fully upgraded medicine pipe, you'll be instantly healing 120 health, whereas with the Medical Jade equipped, this number is increased by an extra 50%, giving us 180 health back over 4.9 seconds, or 36.73 health per second. Taking any damage during this time will stop the healing process short, although internal damage, such as from imperfect parries or your own jades, will not interrupt the heal. But be sure to play defensively until you get the full heal to maximize its value. After taking a puff, you'll need to avoid interrupting the heal for at least 3.26 seconds to break even with the base heal, and from then on, you'll be getting an extra half heal again that you wouldn't normally have gotten without the Medical Jade equipped. Overall, this is a solid jade if you can avoid damage and can take the time to get the full heal, but it does have a bit of risk associated to it if you're struggling to avoid the damage in the first place, so it's probably better suited to exploring where you can take a moment after each fight than it is in high intensity boss fights. It does have some synergy with the Revival Jade. With all max health upgrades, the Revival Jade will revive you with 60 health, meaning a single heal with a maxed out pipe, and the Medical Jade will get you to exactly 100% health. And of course, although maybe a little overkill, it also pairs up with the Quick Dose Jade, which will make it a bit easier to use in combat. Quick Dose Jade. This jade can be purchased for 1250 Jin from Shiyu. The Quick Dose Jade costs 2 CP to equip and reduces the time it takes to use the medicine pipe. Normally the medicine pipe will take 0.85 seconds to use before you regain control. With the Quick Dose Jade equipped, this time is cut by 40%, taking us to 0.51 seconds to use. This is hugely useful during boss fights, especially when you're still learning the pattern, and it can mean the difference between getting a heal off and surviving versus outright dying. And even when you do know the fight's a bit better, this can still help you get a cheeky heal off in situations you otherwise probably couldn't have. As we mentioned a minute ago, this jade can be paired up with the Medical Jade for safer heals, helping you ensure you get the most out of the heal over time. Revival Jade. This jade is given freely by Shiyu after extending the bridge from the outer warehouse to the factory Great Hall. If this opportunity is missed however, he'll sell it to you for 2000 Jin after escaping the prison. The Revival Jade costs 2 CP to equip and will save you from death when your health hits 0. Upon dying with this jade equipped, Yi will be instantly revived with 0.5 seconds of invincibility and regain 25% of his health back. This effect can only be used once per life, and needs to be reset by sitting at a root node. A symbol in the top left of the screen over Yi's heart will indicate if it is currently available. This Jade was one of my favourites for the first portion of the game, and essentially gives you a free get out of jail card for your first death of each fight. Eventually though, there are probably more useful Jades to use in its place, but if you're struggling to learn the game early on, this Jade definitely helps let you ease into it a bit. Just be careful, as effects such as fire can still instantly kill you right after the invincibility buff ends, as there is a bit of a delay before the healing comes through, so you'll be sitting at 1 health briefly. It does have some synergy with the Last Stand Jade, as you'll need to be below 25% health to get the damage buff, putting you in extreme danger of death. Sadly, once you do get revived with 25% health, you won't quite re-trigger the damage buff effect until you can manage to take a little bit of damage and drop yourself back below the 25% mark. It also synergizes with the Swift Blade Jade, which has the potential to get you to very low health, if not offloading the internal damage. And that's all for this one. Consider dropping a like or subscribing if you found this helpful. If you're looking for something else to watch, maybe check out one of these videos on screen now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.